Hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's good to be with you on this Monday, August 1st. And tonight, we're talking about breaking news in America's war on terror. President Biden says a U.S. drone strike in Afghanistan killed the head of Al-Qaeda. We'll have more on Ayman AlZawahiri and consider what this means for counterterrorism there. The death toll in Kentucky continues to rise. Floodwaters have virtually destroyed parts of the state, and forecasters say more rain could be on the way. Meanwhile, California's largest wildfire is big enough to basically make its own weather. We'll have the latest on both disasters. And we lost two legends this weekend. Both of them had the personal support of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We'll remember Basketball Hall of Famer Bill Russell and Star Trek icon Nichelle Nichols. All right, let us begin tonight with breaking news. As you just heard in our special report, President Biden said the U.S. killed Al-Qaeda's leader, a man who played a key role in the September 11th terror attacks. This weekend, a CIA counter-terror drone strike killed Ayman AlZawahiri in Afghanistan. U.S. officials say there were no civilian casualties. The 71-year-old succeeded Osama bin Laden as the head of Al-Qaeda in 2011. He worked with its founder to oversee the 9/11 attacks. Let's begin tonight with retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs. He's an NBC News military analyst. Colonel Jacobs, I wonder what stood out to you in the president's announcement tonight. I think he tried to make the point overall that America's war on terror is not over and that it will not end until all of the people who present a threat to the United States have been brought to justice.
Well, that was one of the messages. I think the other message revolved around the withdrawal, the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. That was really a botched attempt to get us and our allies out of there. It didn't work very well. There's a wide variety of reasons why it didn't. And I think this is an attempt. One of the messages here is that our withdrawal from Afghanistan, notwithstanding, the American military has a long reach and can continue to make it difficult for terrorists around the world, but particularly in Afghanistan. Joshua.
Tell us more about Ayman AlZawahiri. We'll have a fuller obit on him a little bit later, but I would forgive people who would hear his name and go, who? Not quite sure who he is. Osama bin Laden is a name we've heard a lot. What impact does taking him out have?
Well, it's not surprising people would say who, because we've focused so much on Osama bin Laden even after his death. And while Al-Qaeda was a real force in the jihadist world, we and everybody else focused on Osama bin Laden. And that was principally because he was such a charismatic character. He was the guy who drew people in the jihadist world to Al-Qaeda. But in fact, the brains behind the outfit, the guy who really made the strategic and sometimes tactical decisions, the chief operating officer of Al-Qaeda was always al-Zawahri. He started out as a surgeon, as a matter of fact, very scientific-minded and very, very focused. Had no time for being at the top of the food chain. He was the operator. And Osama bin Laden and everybody else relied on him to plan and to cause to be executed the plans for Al-Qaeda. So it's not surprising that al-Zawahiri was not in the public eye, because he was not a personality like Osama bin Laden. But make no mistake about it, he was behind almost everything Al-Qaeda did, Joshua.
Let me read you from, and this is a very rough transcript of the president's remarks, but one aspect of this I think I'd love to have you chime in on. The president said, and I'm quoting from him, that when I ended our military mission in Afghanistan almost a year ago, I made the decision that after 20 years of war, the United States no longer needed thousands of boots on the ground in Afghanistan to protect America from terrorists who seek to do us harm, unquote. Elaborate on that, the fact that this was a drone strike as opposed to a dramatic Navy SEAL raid in the dead of night of the likes that killed Osama bin Laden.
Well, the two things you're talking about are part and parcel of the very same thing, are special operations capabilities around the world. In this particular case, it was a missile, a kinetic missile that is not an exploding projectile, fired from a drone, which could be very, very accurate and does not have the kind of collateral damage you would find in an exploding projectile. But you can have the same kind of surgical precision with what we're talking about, with Special Operations Forces can do, SEALs and Rangers and Delta Force and all the rest. So the kind of force that's used in operations around the world is, that troop list is going to be wholly a function of what the mission is, what the enemy's situation is, and what the desired outcome is. So we shouldn't think that this is going to be the future of special operations. We could still see the kind of special operations we saw when Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan.
Well, and to the point you just made, right after that line that I read, the president noted that in February, U.S. forces conducted what he described as a daring mission in Syria that eliminated the emir of ISIS. I know I got to let you go in a second, but it sounds like, you know, with the array of threats that America faces, including counterterror threats, nation-state actors, and so on, even just down to China and Russia and North Korea being bellicose, that there are various ways that the U.S. is going to deal with the threats that it perceives. It may not always be boots on the ground. It may not always be drones. It could be some kind of cyber offensive in the future. That there are a lot of tools in the belt, depending on what the threat is.
Well, and we should never forget that we have operations going on all the time, and we never hear about them, Joshua.
Yeah. Thank you, Colonel. Much appreciated. That's NBC News military analyst Jack Jacobs starting us off tonight. With regard to the fact that this is a CIA strike, that's a good place to bring in our next guest. Tracy Walder is a former CIA officer and a former FBI special agent. She worked on counterterrorism missions in Afghanistan. Ms. Walder, welcome. Good to have you with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Joshua.
So what is the impact from a counterterror standpoint of taking out Ayman AlZawahiri? He's clearly not the only member of Al-Qaeda. Taking him out, I presume there's someone who would be ready to take over in his place, but what do you see as the significance of this mission, of taking him out?
So, Joshua, you're absolutely right. You know, I'm sure Al-Qaeda has someone who's ready to sort of backfill his place once he has been taken out. However, I agree with Colonel Jacobs in that I have always felt, really since I started working counterterrorism in 2000, that, you know, there really couldn't be an Al-Qaeda without Zawahiri. He really was the brains behind the operation. You know, bin Laden was the charisma and the heart and sort of the mouthpiece of it, but really he couldn't be successful in what he wanted to do without Zawahiri. Zawahiri was by his side when bin Laden issued his declaration of war against the United States back in 1998. So I do feel, you know, look, you can't kill an idea. You can't kill the idea of Al-Qaeda. However, I do feel that this is a very large operational blow to them.
How is that idea doing these days? I mean, we've heard about strikes to ISIS, Al-Qaeda. The Taliban are resurgent in Afghanistan. They're kind of more of a nation-state actor, as it were. There are all kinds of terror threats around the world. The U.S. military has been active in parts of Africa to try to combat an array of extremist groups there. What does the landscape look like right now in terms of U.S. counterterror?
So I think you're right. I don't think that their idea is, I guess, flourishing right now in terms of what their operational capabilities are. However, where we do see the terrorism ideology flourishing is in what we call sort of these fragile states, right? Or countries that are absent of governments where, you know, the needs of the people aren't being met. And this is when terrorist groups come in and really flourish. So we're seeing that sort of in Yemen and in Somalia, places where we're seeing large upticks. And I think Afghanistan is also one of those places. You know, the Afghan government left and was replaced by the Taliban. And I think the Taliban really wasn't fulfilling the needs of its people. And, you know, we're seeing this increase in Al-Qaeda there. So I think if we can get a handle on sort of this fragile state and the influx of terrorism that we're seeing in there, then maybe we have a good shot at really combating this ideology.
There's a phenomenal exhibition, I presume it's still there, at the 9/11 Museum here in Lower Manhattan at the rebuilt World Trade Center, that walks you through the operation to take out Osama bin Laden. Mind-blowing in terms of the complexity and all of the work that goes into it to put boots on the ground to go after him. But I don't have the same understanding of what a CIA operation would be like, involving a drone rather than boots on the ground. Can you give us some kind of window into the kind of planning that would be involved? The president still is the one who says go or don't go, but how would something like that differ from what we know about the Navy SEAL operation that took out Osama bin Laden?
Sure, and I'll do that in a way that I'm not revealing any sources and methods that will get me in trouble from the CIA. So one of the things that I'm able to speak about in my book is that I was on duty the night that we lost Osama bin Laden in the mountains of Tora Bora back in sort of November, December of 2001. And really what that operation entailed was the use of aerial drones, folks on the ground, and then also signals intelligence. And so what you really want to do in a situation like this, drones are wonderful. They're an incredible asset, and they're amazing at really minimizing civilian casualties. But you have to also engage what we call the other ints, so the human intelligence, so sources on the ground, sources who are able to fully vet and give us the accurate location of where these targets are. Signals intelligence, are we hearing anything about where they are? And then you take the imagery intelligence, which would come from a drone, and to have sort of eyes on the target. And so that's where you want to take those three and really use them and combine them to effectively take out a target with minimal loss to civilian life.
I hear you on that. I appreciate, obviously, that there are certain things we don't know and can't know about the way that this went. I think one of the things that's been very public, and I don't know if you have a perspective on this or not, perhaps not, but I think after the military pulled boots on the ground out of Afghanistan, I think a lot of people looked at that and were like, that's it? After 20 years, we just leave and let the Taliban have it and we're just gone? Is that it? And this clearly shows that, well, no, that's not it. We can still have a presence there, but just in different ways. How should we be thinking about counterterrorism now in a world where it's not necessarily boots on the ground, but you can do something like this through various intelligence, drone strikes, and so on? It almost feels like Americans have to have a bit of a paradigm shift to really understand the way that the military, the CIA, and others affect counterterrorism around the world today, differently from 2001.
I completely agree with you. And you know what? I'm going to be completely transparent and say even I was frustrated, when troops were coming out of Afghanistan. As someone who was sitting at CIA headquarters on September 11th, I served tours in the middle of Afghanistan, and that was very difficult for me to see just on an emotional level for obvious reasons. But I think what this really goes to show is that the best way, in my opinion, to really destabilize these terrorist networks is through what we call asymmetrical warfare, not your conventional warfare, which I think we are very much accustomed to, which is folks on the ground, large-scale bombings, large-scale air raids, those kinds of things. We have to remember that, terrorism is not conventional. We're not fighting state against state. This is state against an ideology, and it lends itself to a different type of warfare that is a little bit different than what we see sort of, in the movies and throughout pop culture.
Really appreciate the analysis tonight. Tracy Walder, I should mention the book is called The Unexpected Spy, From the CIA to the FBI, My Secret Life Taking Down Some of the World's Most Notorious Terrorists. Ms. Walder, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua.
So, Ayman AlZawahiri is dead. But who was he? 9/11 was not his first time on the U.S. government's radar. It was already watching him over his alleged role in attacks on U.S. embassies across Africa. NBC chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has more.
Ayman AlZawahiri was Al-Qaeda's leader, succeeding Osama bin Laden, its public face in dozens of videos attacking the U.S. and its allies. He directed Al-Qaeda's thinking, led its operations, was a key planner of the 9/11 attacks and the 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in East Africa.
We know that it was at Zawahiri's urging that bin Laden really took an interest in attacking the United States.
He meticulously planned mass murder, tried to arm Al-Qaeda with weapons of mass destruction, and wrote its declaration of war against the U.S. His transformation into the world's most wanted terrorist had an unlikely start. He was born in 1951 into a wealthy Egyptian family of doctors and scholars. He became radicalized as a teenager after joining the fundamentalist Muslim Brotherhood before training to be a surgeon. At 31, he was one of hundreds arrested after the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat. He was tortured during 3 years in an Egyptian jail and left seeking revenge.
They intend to kill us.
By his mid-30s, he was a leader in Egypt's Islamic Jihad. He met the Saudi Osama bin Laden, who was fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan. They bonded. Zawahiri became bin Laden's personal doctor. By 1998, the Islamic Jihad and Al-Qaeda merged, Zawahiri as second in command.
Bin Laden was a relative newcomer to the world of jihad. Zawahiri had well-established credentials. These two uniting up provided a team that could not be broken.
America was their next target, the World Trade Center in their sights. After 9/11, Zawahiri was seen in Afghanistan and then went into hiding, a $25 million reward on his head. He kept Al-Qaeda alive as ISIS became the West's main target.
Islam, and we are calling.
Pious, ruthless, the brains behind the world's worst terrorist attack. Even in his final video, he was calling on Muslims to attack America. Richard Engel, NBC News, London.
After the break, we will take you to Kentucky. Forced responders are still searching for people after catastrophic flooding. Is more rain on the way? We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. Floods, wildfires, intense heat. There's extreme weather across the country. Now, the Biden administration has announced efforts to do more about it. Vice President Kamala Harris says states can apply for $1 billion worth of grants to deal with extreme weather events. She made the announcement today in Miami at the National Hurricane Center.
Climate change has become a climate crisis, and a threat has now become a reality. To provide support and resources has been a goal and a priority for our community, but for our administration, so that we can respond and recover and rebuild when disaster hits certain communities.
Right now, disaster continues to hit eastern Kentucky. The floods there have killed at least 37 people, from toddlers to octogenarians. And once again, Governor Andy Beshear warned that the death toll will probably keep rising.
There are hundreds of unaccounted for people minimum, and we just don't have a firm grasp on that. I wish we did. There are a lot of reasons why it's nearly impossible.
President Biden approved a major disaster declaration for Kentucky, but the road to recovery could be long. Entire towns are still submerged, and more storms may be on the way. NBC's George Solis is standing by. George, how is Kentucky preparing for whatever rain might be on the way?
Yeah, Joshua, right now it's all about mobilizing. They're using this reprieve from the rain to get to those areas where residents are still displaced, areas where the roads or bridges have washed out. They're using every kind of vehicle at their disposal to get to them. Some people are being airlifted out, as we've seen in some video of rescues in this region. And right now people are also contending with cell phone service that is still spotty in some places. So many people still unsure if their loved one is safe or has been found. As we know, hundreds of people right now are still missing, and that's not counting those that are displaced in shelters right now. So at this point, the name of the game is to get ahead of any rain that might move into this region and save as many people as possible. Joshua?
Yeah, you mentioned that people who are displaced are missing. I'm sure there are a lot of broken hearts there right now. What are folks telling you?
Yeah, there is so much devastation here. Behind me, you might be able to see the river that is raging. We have seen people's belongings, fridges, personal items just flowing from whatever came upstream. So much hope in that more people will be found throughout the coming days as they start to get more cell phone service. Not far from here, we've seen community in action, people handing out food and water, people that don't even live in this neighborhood, just to give people a helping hand for so many that have lost everything during this devastating flood. Joshua?
I understand you spoke to a woman there who talked about what she had lost. What did she tell you?
She basically told us that she lost everything in this flood. And that's a story that we hear pretty frequently. We talked to one gentleman who told us this area looked like a war zone. He was a combat veteran. He said nothing like he's ever seen before. And to that person that you mentioned, we did speak with her. Here's what she had to say.
There's nothing else left for us to lose. We've lost 4 houses, a couple of vehicles, all our farm equipment. I mean, technically, there's nothing else left for us to lose.
Yeah, again, just so heartbreaking to hear these stories, and presumably we'll hear more of these in the coming days. Hopefully, if the waters continue to recede and more people are saved. Joshua?
Looking at the river behind you, that rapidly flowing, way swollen river, just makes one wonder about the search and rescue operations. Kentucky's Governor Andy Beshear talked about how some bodies had been swept hundreds of yards or more than a quarter mile from where they had been, from where the person's lives had been lost. Before I got to let you go, George, how are rescue operators or rescue workers dealing with search and rescue, considering what's behind you and just what the environment is like? How is that working?
It's very difficult, as you can imagine, Joshua, and right now they are really counting on that rain to let up. Any chance to give people a break here. They are using jet skis, they are using kayaks, they are using those helicopters to rescue those people that have yet to be found or people that are still stuck in areas where they have not been able to reach them at this point. And again, so much critical here is that cell phone service, right? Being able to communicate with those people who have been presumably lost, just giving them a chance to reach out their loved ones saying, hey, I'm fine, I'm here, please come get me. That is just giving people just a small glimmer of hope in an area where there has already been so much devastation. Joshua?
Yeah, I can imagine that once communications are up and once signals are steadier, that it's going to be very different in terms of the rescue operation. But for now, George, we appreciate the latest from where you are. Thank you. Kentuckians are watching the forecast, hoping to dry out. Meanwhile, parts of the West are hoping to cool down from intense heat waves. Let's continue now with NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, starting in Kentucky, what's it look like there? Looks like there's going to be increased. I'm just looking at the green on the map. Looks like the threat of rain is not going away.
Yeah, we have to get through one more dangerous night, and then I think we're going to see all those rivers really going down. I was just taking a look at the Kentucky River. Of course, we were looking at, in Jackson there behind George, and, the water's muddy and it's murky, and there was, still big tree branches and logs going down behind him. So even though the heavy rain is still, 5 days ago, everything is still super saturated. The rivers are all still high, so it doesn't take that much to get additional flooding. The Kentucky River, by the way, was at 31 feet. It's gone down to about 12 feet. It's supposed to go up about 6 more feet with the additional rain tonight. Just to give you an idea of how crazy it was about 5-6 days ago, 1 in 1,000 year flood. They don't happen that often. They happen extremely rarely in anyone's lifetime. And to get something like that twice in a week would be like, winning the Mega Millions practically. That's the odds, how slim it would be. So let's get through the forecast and show you what we're going to deal with tonight. It's not just Kentucky that we're concerned with. Our friends in West Virginia, you have the same type of terrain. We're in the central Appalachians. We have the mountains. We have a lot of small streams and creeks. And when we get thunderstorms in this area of the country, some of our most historic and most deadly flash floods have taken place in this area of the nation. So, we're up to 37 fatalities in eastern Kentucky. If you look at the map there of that word Jackson, just to the east of that, to the right towards Pikeville, that's Knott County. That's where half of the fatalities were, and you are in a flash flood watch continuing into tomorrow morning. On radar, the thunderstorms are just now beginning to pop up. Nothing too bad. We've had a couple rolling through northern portions of West Virginia. There's a few up around Cincinnati. It's during the overnight hours that these storms will really flare up and head to the south. So this is our future radar. This kind of predicts where we think the storms will be. Our computers are telling us that around Evansville around 10 p.m. tonight, notice the thunderstorms right along the Kentucky-Ohio border. And then as we go throughout the overnight period, these storms sink to the south. The heaviest rain still looks to focus north of Jackson into West Virginia, and then during the middle of the night, the storms will weaken and be hit and miss in the areas that were hit the worst by the flooding. By the time the sun rises, it diminished. So here's our estimated rainfall totals for tonight. You notice the big, huge bullseye of 3 inches. Don't be surprised you wake up tomorrow morning to hear about flash flooding in southern Indiana, western Kentucky, and then isolated flash flooding in that same areas from Jackson to Pikeville, that area that was hard hit. We should have isolated flash flooding tonight into early tomorrow morning. And then I was taking a look at the next 7 days because we just need a dry stretch. We got to get these rivers down. This is the 7-day rainfall forecast. Everywhere in yellow is 1 inch, orange is 2 inches, 3 inches is in the red. So it's still going to be a pretty wet week. So the rivers will remain fairly high, but nothing crazy like what we saw. And the other thing we have to be concerned with is isolated severe weather. You know, we have the search and rescuers out there, helicopters flying around, and they're going to be dealing with thunderstorms and possible lightning during the overnight hours. About 7 million people are in the slight risk. We've already had some very strong thunderstorms south of Pittsburgh with some tornado warnings north of Morgantown. And we have that cluster of storms. Remember I was telling you that very heavy rain threat around Evansville? Well, you can already see that setting up. The training of thunderstorms, what we call training, is more or less, if you're on like a railroad tracks, the thunderstorms are going in the same area time and time again. And that's already setting up now around Evansville, Indiana. So, and Joshua, finally, the August outlook, not great for the mid-Atlantic and areas of eastern Kentucky. It does look like we keep it wet throughout much of this month. So, you know, hopefully they'll be able to not be too delayed in their rescue and recovery efforts tonight with these storms. But tomorrow morning, it'll be interesting to see what it looks like at sunrise.
Yeah, looks like more rain for Kentucky, and then Evansville, Louisville, Cincinnati, they've got some more rain to deal with, too. Thank you, Bill. That's NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns with the National Outlook. Well, we mentioned the heat, and that takes us to California. That state is fighting its worst wildfires so far this year. The McKinney Fire is near the Oregon border. Tens of thousands of acres have burned since just this Friday. At least 2 people have died. NBC's Gotti Schwartz has more.
Yeah, so just to recap, this is what firefighters are dealing with right now. Sweltering heat, extreme drought conditions, and these rolling thunderstorms that could be blessings as well as possible curses. They could bring rain, but they could also bring dangerous lightning strikes. Now, just last night, 12 more fires were started from lightning in that area. And on top of that, erratic wind gusts that can literally blow the fire in any direction coming from those thunderstorms as well. So right now, the hardest hit area that we know of is Klamath River, where the small town has already seen dozens of buildings burned to the ground, including their community center there that is now just a pile of rubble. We also know that 2 people nearby were found dead inside their car in their driveway. Authorities think they were killed while they were trying to escape some of those flames. So we know that fire continues to grow. It has exploded in size to become the largest fire at this point in California. And that all happened really in a matter of 48 hours. Thousands of people have been evacuated. Meanwhile, the nearby Pacific Crest Trail has also been closed down. Authorities there have extracted about 60 hikers from the backcountry. The governor has declared a state of emergency. More firefighters are now headed to that area, and the fire is now pushing well past that 50,000 acres. And what we understand right now is around 1% contained. Back to you.
Thank you, Gotti. That was NBC's Gotti Schwartz with the latest on California's largest wildfire at the moment. We'll get to some of today's other top stories in a moment, including the longest sentence yet for a January 6th rioter and the first grain shipment out of Ukraine since the war started. Tonight's headlines begin with the war in Ukraine. America's spending on that war is up to $8 billion. Another $500 million's worth of military aid is on its way, including ammunition and artillery systems like rocket launchers. Russia is ramping up its arsenal as well. This weekend, President Putin announced that the Russian Navy will soon get hypersonic missiles. He claims that they have a range of more than 600 miles and cannot be countered. Meanwhile, President Zelensky seems to be coming to grips with Russia's scorched earth campaign in eastern Ukraine. He's ordering residents to evacuate the Donetsk area immediately.
Це дійсно потрібно зробити. Це рішення все одно доведеться приймати. Все одно, повірте мені. І чим раніше це буде зроблено, чим більше людей вийдуть з Донецької області зараз, тим менше людей російська армія встигне убити. Тому, якщо у вас є можливість, говоріть, будь ласка, з тими, хто...
Donetsk is in the Donbas region. President Zelensky says hundreds of thousands of people are still there. Russia has focused its offensive there for the last few months. This war has strained the world's food supplies, but a deal backed by the United Nations is providing a little relief. Today, Ukraine shipped out 26,000 tons of corn, its first shipment since the war started. It should reach Lebanon in 2 days. NBC's Josh Lederman has the latest.
Joshua, the first grain ship to leave Ukraine since this war started is heading to Lebanon, a country with its own economic crisis that relies on Ukraine for well over 50% of its grain imports. It's carrying 26,000 tons of corn, but that is just a drop in the bucket when you think about the more than 20 million tons of agricultural products that have been trapped in this country since the naval blockade imposed by Russia. And it's going to take a while to work through that backlog, because officials here say they don't want to go full bore right away. This is a test run as they see whether this very delicate deal with Russia is going to be able to hold, whether they're going to be able to successfully get these ships to where they need to go without Russia going back on its word and potentially attacking or threatening these ships. I spoke with the infrastructure minister here today about why this is so critical, not only for Ukraine and its beleaguered economy, but also for the rest of the world. Take a listen.
For us, it's very important. The second, we understand that export of agricultural products is very important for all our allies, for United States, for UK, for European Union. So we understand that it's not only Ukrainian now problem. This is blockade by Russians. So it's like world problem. So
Minister Kubrikov told me that for the next couple of weeks, it's going to continue to be slow going, with a maximum of 3 ships per day leaving the ports in the Odessa region. But within the next month or month and a half, he said he expects Ukraine to get back up to about 3 million tons per month of corn, wheat, other agricultural products that they can export, which is still less than the 5 to 7 million they were doing before the war, but is certainly much more than they've been able to do through other means like trains and truckloads of grain being exported from this country. So it will go quite a ways to address the global food crisis that the world has been fearing. And when you step back and think about the immense, dangerous and logistical challenges in carrying this out, not only do these ships have to deal with the threat of potential Russian attack, they also have to navigate through waters that are filled with mines. The Ukrainians removed mines from a narrow pathway in the Black Sea for this ship to be able to go through. Those pilots have to be very, very careful as they navigate through that channel to make sure it's safe and on to next destination where that grain is so badly needed. Joshua?
Thank you, Josh. That's NBC's Josh Lederman reporting from Kyiv. The consequences keep coming for January 6th rioters. Today, a judge sentenced one man to more than 7 years in prison. Guy Reffitt was a recruiter for the far-right group The 3 Percenters. He brought a gun to the Capitol, intending to capture lawmakers, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Check out this video from the riot. You can see him right there. A jury convicted Reffitt in March on 5 felony charges, including obstruction of Congress and bringing a gun to the insurrection. Prosecutors said he also threatened his children against turning him in, saying, quote, "Traitors get shot." That did not stop his son from calling the FBI. Now, to be clear, he was not charged with domestic terrorism. There's actually no specific offense in the criminal code for that. Prosecutors argued for a longer sentence, but the judge denied that motion. Up next, we preview the primaries. 5 states head to the polls tomorrow. Abortion is on the ballot in Kansas. So is former President Trump, by way of his endorsements. That's just ahead. Stay close. The midterm elections continue tomorrow with big primaries in 5 states. Voters will hit the polls in Arizona, Kansas, Missouri, and Michigan. Washington State also has primaries tomorrow, but not at the polls. It votes entirely by mail. Kansas will vote on an abortion measure. It's the nation's first abortion rights vote since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And former President Trump is backing a number of loyal candidates. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard has more from Phoenix.
These Arizona primaries are presenting the clearest choice for Republican voters yet here across the country. Coming off of these public hearings, these January 6th Select Committee public hearings, the options for voters are clear. I mean, just look at the governor's race here in Arizona. You got Kari Lake, who is the Trump-backed candidate. You got Karen Taylor Robeson, who is the Mike Pence-backed candidate here. Both of them are political newcomers. And so for voters, it's very crystal clear who they get to choose from. But you've also got other Trump-backed candidates. U.S. Senate candidate Blake Masters. Mark Finchem is running for Secretary of State. Abe Hamadeh for Attorney General. Each of those three, Kari Lake, Mark Finchem, Abe Hamadeh, they all have called for the decertification of the 2020 election. I mean, this is the type of Republicans that ultimately could go up against the Democrats in the general election. You know, polling has been so close in these races here, but it's going to be the voters that determine what direction they want their party to take moving ahead. The one other race that I think that we all should be keeping our eye on Tuesday night is that of Rusty Bowers. He is the Arizona House Speaker, who is the Republican that testified on Capitol Hill this summer in front of that January 6th Select Committee that he was pressured by Trump allies to help overturn Arizona's Joe Biden win and send the fake slate of Trump electors to Washington, D.C. instead of Joe Biden's. He is now facing a Trump-backed challenger in his bid to serve another term in the state legislature. You know, there's nothing much more local politics than a state legislative run here. And if voters were to reject Rusty Bowers, it'd be a strong statement as to where the Republican Party, at least in Arizona, among Republican voters, wants to take their party into the future ahead.
That's NBC's Vaughn Hilliard with a preview from Arizona. We will have live election coverage tomorrow night. Some of the state's polls will close in our hour, but after that, Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker will have live primary results in a Meet the Press election night special right after this program, and I'll join them for analysis throughout the night. Could be a rather late night, but lots to watch tomorrow. So join us for early poll closings and then the election special at 9 p.m. Eastern right after Now Tonight here on NBC News Now. Some political candidates are turning to TikTok as a campaigning tool, and the reason is probably obvious. What better way could there be these days to reach younger voters? Here's NBC's Hallie Jackson.
Sure, you've seen the dances, the lip syncs, the trick shots, but it's a different kind of content starting to trend on TikTok ahead of the midterms. Political campaigning.
This is the year we find out if TikTok can affect a U.S. election.
Ken Russell's a Democrat running for Congress in Florida. He's jumping on viral challenges and trending audio to get views and to get a message out.
Really, whatever news is happening in the day, a lot of things that I see on TikTok that I want to either respond to, but it's a blend of humor and wit and accessibility.
Take this stitch, for example. Russell dropping it.
Hey, are you registered to vote there?
To remind people to register to vote. Seen by 6 million people and counting. Labeled absolutely unhinged by one meme account. With Russell responding, campaign promise, less hinges. And he likes the back and forth with people in his comments.
For them to hear someone that is an elected official or someone running for office who actually hears them, responds, and takes their concerns into a policy concept, it's very engaging for people.
Not everyone's so into this TikTok trend. In a different race in Florida, Republican Senator Marco Rubio is on attack about it, going after his Democratic opponent, Congresswoman Val Demings, for her campaign's videos on the app, which is owned by a Chinese company, ByteDance.
The evidence suggests China is also snooping on TikTok users.
A new Rubio ad online accuses Demings of posting TikToks, quote, despite major security concerns, and says Marco Rubio fights back against communist China. Val Demings makes TikToks. The senator was asked about candidates who use the app.
It's reckless, irresponsible, and in my view, unexplainable.
His campaign tells NBC every time Demings shares a TikTok, she irresponsibly encourages Americans to use a platform that leaves their personal information more vulnerable to China. TikTok has said all its American user data is stored in the U.S. and backed up in Singapore, not China. But the Demings campaign says there's an audience on TikTok, telling NBC News they're working relentlessly, they say, to meet voters wherever they are, in person or online, in our fight to defeat career politician Marco Rubio. Adding, while Rubio talks tough on China, he refuses to show up and do the work to help America compete.
And I need you to take this journey with me on this people-powered campaign.
Demings videos racking up nearly 3 million views on issues like gun violence, LGBTQ+ rights, and abortion access.
The decision is a blow to women's rights to control their own body.
They're not technically ads, since TikTok has banned traditional political advertising, and that's partly why some Republican strategists say TikTok is not necessarily the best option for politicians looking to raise money and register voters.
Reaching them in different channels besides TikTok. That's on YouTube, that's on Facebook, that's on Instagram, that's via text message, that's via email. And so Republican campaigns are focused on those more high impact channels for reaching younger voters and voters of all types.
That was NBC's Hallie Jackson reporting. This weekend, we said goodbye to two legends, Bill Russell and Nichelle Nichols. We'll remember their impacts on culture and civil rights before we go. The world lost two trailblazers this weekend. One made his mark in the NBA, the other made her mark on the future. Bill Russell helped the Boston Celtics win 11 championships in 13 years. That includes 8 in a row from 1959 to 66. During this time, he was also an active civil rights leader, and that led to racist attacks against him and his family. Back in 2011, President Obama awarded him the nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. A statement from the family says Bill Russell died peacefully yesterday with his wife, Janine, by his side. He lived to be 88. Nichelle Nichols was as much a pioneer as Mr. Russell was. She pivoted from musical theater to play Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, debuting in 1966. Her groundbreaking role as an officer on the Enterprise showed her as an equal among its multiracial crew. Nichols battled dementia in her later years. Her family says she died of natural causes. She lived to be 89. Joining us now is Eric Deggans, TV critic for NPR. Mr. Deggans, welcome. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start with Bill Russell. I'm not even sure where to begin because his life just encompassed so much, including just how much he endured to be the legend he was. I mean, he tells a story about coming home from a 3-day weekend and finding his home robbed in shambles, the N-word spray painted on the walls, the burglars poured beer on the pool table, ripped up the felt, broke into this trophy case, and just kind of desecrated the home. Talk about the legacy that he left, not just as a basketball player, but with the platform that afforded him.
Yeah, his daughter actually told that story, and it was emblematic of the oppression that he faced as a trailblazer in the NBA. He was open about the fact that a lot of Boston basketball fans did not like the fact that a black player had joined the team. And he faced, of course, a lot of racism in his, from people who were supposed to be fans of the team that he was playing for in Boston. And he went beyond just facing down racism as a player in the NBA. He joined with other notable black sports figures at the time to support Muhammad Ali when Muhammad Ali had his championships revoked because he refused to serve in the Vietnam War. And, there's a landmark, of course, picture of him and Muhammad Ali and Jim Brown and a lot of black sports figures at the time, superstars at the time, who thought it was important to speak out on issues of race and racism and be advocates because they were the stars of Black America. And they were the voices of people who, particularly in the late 1960s, were starting to demand more agency and demand a greater voice and demand voting rights, demand better schools, better neighborhoods. And so these athletes like Bill Russell were sort of the vanguard of that movement, and they saw it as a personal responsibility to step forward and advocate for this issue.
Feel like, yeah, I feel like Nichelle Nichols is almost, that one almost hits me harder just because I was such a Star Trek fan. And the impact of her, this, you know, brilliant, beautiful black woman in the future, and just being able to be part of Gene Roddenberry's vision that we would all make it to the future. I guess it's kind of hard for me to talk about and to think about, because even now I have moments where I wonder if there's room for me, if there's a place for me. And I think the beauty of a story like Star Trek, having someone like her from the beginning, is that it reminds, you know, a little black boy like me that there's room for you. There's room for me in the future.
Exactly. I mean, one of the big problems with not having diversity in science fiction stories is that it tells people that in the future, black people don't exist. And, you know, Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, wanted diversity to be a cornerstone of the series. He wanted to present a future where we had gotten over racism. So it was important to him to have a black woman who had station and agency and responsibility on the bridge of the Enterprise. And what's remarkable about Nichelle Nichols is that she went on from that. Well, number one, she almost quit the show because she thought her character didn't have enough to do. And Martin Luther King Jr., the famous civil rights leader, talked her out of quitting the show because too many people were looking up to her. And she wound up singing at his funeral. Then later, she became an advocate for NASA, you know, trying to talk about the importance of science and inspire people of color, especially young women of color, to get more involved and to consider becoming astronauts. And Mae Jemison, the first black woman astronaut, tipped her hat to the character by reciting some of the lines from Star Trek whenever she would communicate on the International Space Station. So this is a woman who has a tremendous legacy and also found a way. What we're talking about, both these people, is they found a way to advocate beyond whatever it was that they were doing that brought them to the public eye, and they found a way to blaze a trail outside of their field and inspire people in ways that perhaps you might not have expected. Even Whoopi Goldberg talked on The View today about how she was inspired by the character of Uhura, and of course, you know, Whoopi Goldberg would join the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation, in part because she wanted to pay homage to Nichelle Nichols and the trail that she began to blaze in the late 1960s on the classic Star Trek.
Yeah, two people who I think it's safe to say made an impact based on visibility, letting us know that there should be room for us today, and we should have a future where there's room for all of us, for everyone to be conceived as a part of the future. NPR TV critic Eric Deggans, it's always good to see you, man. Thank you very much.
Always good to see you, my brother. Thank you.
A number of you sent us your thoughts on Will Smith. On Friday, you may remember he posted a video nearly 6 minutes long apologizing for slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars. Here's what Arthur left in our inbox.
Will Smith apologizing. I mean, that is good. I mean, that is definitely good. But the thing that he failed to say, I'm sorry. See, I know they kind of sound like the same. I'm sorry. I apologize. But the word to say, Chris, I'm sorry.
Arthur, thanks for getting in touch with us. Jill Renee said she's feeling hopeful. Here's what she told us.
I just hope the best for both of them. I've seen Chris Rock personally, and I'm a big fan of Will Smith. I hope everything works out.
Me too, Jill Renee. Thank you very much. Feel free to leave us a voicemail with your thoughts on this, 888-575-2NBC, or email us nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Hey, before we go, we'd also love your thoughts on a different controversy, this one involving Beyonce's new album. Did you hear about this? She says she's removing a word in the song Heated, spaz. Some consider it a slur against people with disabilities, offensive to those with conditions like cerebral palsy. Beyoncé's team said it was not meant to be harmful, but she'll replace it. You may remember this summer, Lizzo came under fire for using the same word. She since updated the lyric in the song Girls. Lizzo said, quote, "I never want to promote derogatory language," unquote. If you or someone close to you suffers from a physical disability, we'd love to hear from you. How do words like this affect you? Or at NBC Now Tonight on social media, or leave us a brief but brilliant voicemail, 888-575-2NBC, or email nowtonight@nbcnews.com. Remember, we will have primary coverage starting tomorrow night. Some of the polls close during our hour. Coverage continues at 9 p.m. Eastern with a Meet the Press election night special. Chuck Todd and Kristen Welker will lead you through it, and I'll be a part of the analysis through the night. Look forward to hearing from you on these two stories and seeing you tomorrow for primary coverage. But until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.